Welcome to the Business with Beers podcast. This is the place where we help entrepreneurs expand their business, build their wealth, and generate passive income. I'm your host, Brian Beers, an entrepreneur who's on a mission to inspire growth from everyone around me. Remember that you need to take the actions others won't, and you can live the life that others don't. Please be sure to check out my weekly newsletter that now drops every Thursday. It includes one quote, one tweet, one podcast recommendation, plus some business and investing insight from me. It's short and it's sweet. My goal is to provide you with just a couple gold nuggets to help inspire your growth. Go to brianbeers.com to subscribe. Hello, everyone. I am excited today to bring you Todd Randall. Todd is a serial entrepreneur who's built 8 businesses, including spas, gyms, a construction company, a wholesale company, and now a coaching practice working with other budding entrepreneurs. I'm excited to hear everything he's got to say. So welcome to the show, Todd.
Welcome. Everything I have to say, really? Everything?
Majority of it, maybe. We'll see. I'll tell you at the end of it. And,
thanks for having me on.
Awesome. So kind of quite the resume. I mean, where do you kind of want to start to give us an overview of your background?
Yeah, so I think what's interesting about me, because I'm like a lot of other people, I was a professional and worked in a corporate environment and just wanted something different, that's all. And I wasn't an inventor. I didn't have some special innovation. I didn't come with a lot of capital. I didn't cash out from a startup or something. And so I think my success story is more about, can you be a dull entrepreneur and still scale? Right? Can you open up a business that maybe isn't sexy or doesn't, require venture capital and just scale it in such a way that you can accomplish the lifestyle you want? And so that involves 2 things, right? Is can you scale an existing business? And 2, can you decide what you want so that you can prioritize well, right? Yep. I think that's my real story. So I was a pharmacist and then a corporate bureaucrat for a $300 billion company. I did all kinds of stuff, marketing and sales management and biz dev, et cetera. But, midlife crisis like lots of folks have. I thought I was going to be an entrepreneur early. And I tried a handful of things that just didn't work out so well. With enthusiasm, mind you. And I thought, you know what, maybe I just could use some more business experience. So I went and worked for somebody else. And that did work really well for me. Because I was always learning, like I was constantly picking up skills, thought, I'll use this someday. And then I kind of lacked the courage to bail. Yep. And I'm sure lots of your listeners have, dealt with that too. It's like, when's the right time? I probably could have started my own business 15 years before I did. But when I finally did feel confident, I just grabbed at the first iron that felt good and put that in the fire and off I went.
Yeah. It's funny because a lot of people think a W-2 job's like more secure than being an entrepreneur. But at the end of the day, I mean, you could, maybe, you can lose your job at any point and get laid off. I mean, when you're an entrepreneur, you're your own boss. I mean, there's obviously the pressure's on you you have to perform. You got to show up every day. It's, it shifts kind of the responsibility, but a lot of times, I mean, that's what I've heard from a number of people who've kind of made that jump is, and I don't know, maybe you could speak to it, but for them, it was like, they quit this job, especially if you're a professional, you're easily rehirable. So like you go out, you do your thing. If it doesn't work, like your safety net's still pretty strong because you've got the skill set, network, resources, et cetera. And to make that Jeep. So I don't know, is that the case for you? What kind of gave you the confidence to roll with it?
Yeah, I did enough sales and sales management that I was rehirable for the rest of my life. Like there's lots of folks that need people with good work ethic and good sales and management skill. But I just wanted a different lifestyle. That's all. Like that's a real grind. And the risk to reward relationship is interesting because there's some point, right, where if you're a good bureaucrat, if you're a good professional, a good accountant, a good sales manager, what have you, there comes a point where there's a limit to what a company can really pay you. Like I was one of the highest paid sales professionals I'd ever met. And I still could stop what I'm doing, start a business, and replace that income with a modestly successful private business because I got to keep all the income. Yep. I wasn't sharing it with anybody. A big business knows that people have an innate value or role, not people. People have great value, but a role has an innate value. And in sales, it's hard to pay someone more than a couple $100,000 a year in sales, regardless of how good you are, except in very special environments. And so then it begs the question, well, are there businesses that someone with good management skill and good judgment and it's tad bit of capital, aren't there businesses you can open up that could make you 100 or 200 grand a year? And I think that's where franchising comes in. I think lots of folks start that way, like you did, like I did. But even real estate, you could pump a little bit into real estate or some other direct sales vehicles, and you can replace all the income you made at a company, and now you get to keep all of it. And here's the big and, right? You get to apply scale tools. Right? Yep. There is risk reward to all scale tools, but a moderate program of scale can build you a business that makes you many times the income that you'd have at a big company. And for like a midlife professional, that's a reality.
Yep. And so, what was the first business you went into then?
I started some spas.
Okay, through a franchise.
I bought a franchise agreement and designed a spa in San Diego. I moved there for it because I thought it was the right demographic and the right climate for it. I was in healthcare, so I appreciated the kind of healthcare-ish aspect of it. And at the time, that was exploding from a growth perspective. I was an athlete, so I used massage all the time, and so it was normal to me to use massage as part of my healthcare. But for a lot of the population, massage wasn't kind of an accepted healthcare practice yet. And so, the population in America went from like kind of 6% of people using massage regularly to like 20 or 25% in the course of a decade. And that's the trend that I jumped on when I opened the spas.
Okay. So you went from there, and then you went to, I guess, various other businesses. And then I guess kind of fast forward up today, what do you do today?
Yeah. So, the massage franchise turned into a couple gym franchises, and then I had a coaching brokering practice. And then I bought a construction company during the pandemic.
Okay.
And that has done quite well. So I started an ancillary business, another construction company that's kind of in an associated path. And I spend a lot of time coaching and consulting now because I've always been a remote business owner. I put good people in place and I supervise from a distance. That's kind of my magic sauce.
Okay. So how many businesses do you operate, own, run right now?
Just 4 right now. I've had as many as 6. I think it depends on the size of the business and the complexity of the business, but I would have no trouble, running a dozen. But the businesses that I had at the time were pretty administrative.
So what are the 4 right now? So you got the construction company.
I have 1 gym left. I have 2 construction companies and the coaching consulting business.
Okay.
I also do some flips in real estate. I oftentimes don't count that because they're individual transactions.
So then what does that look like from a management perspective? Do you have like operators in place? Do they have equity in the business? I mean, you're in Florida. These places are these in Florida, or are these kind of all over the US?
I have 2 in California and 2 in Florida.
Okay. So you're opposite side of the country. So yeah, talk to me about how do you run it?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you the way that I did it, and I recommend this for people that are starting the business the first time, is I was in it and I did everything.
Yep.
Right. I built it. I hired all the staff. I trained all the staff personally. I dealt with all the most important customers, all the HR and finance and banking and all of it, until I realized what the hell was going on. Right. That's an important aspect of any business. And then, like the first business I had, a lot of franchises are built on the premise that $50,000 or $100,000 will make one franchisee happy for one location, right? And so you'll see a lot of franchises kind of in that realm. And so a business that size doesn't really have the capacity to hire a very experienced operator. But I did consider it. So what I did is I took someone with potential and trained them to be my operator. And then as soon as I had them making decisions 80% of the time as well as I could, then I went off and built a second location, and then a third and a fourth. And so for all my businesses, I have either bought them with an operator in place, or I have run them personally and trained an operator to make decisions that would be in alignment with my judgment.
Okay. And so for the construction company, was that the case?
Construction company, I bought the first construction company I bought was a wholesaler. They wholesale equipment to fencing contractors. And it's a pretty big business, and they had an expert on hand already. Okay. And that's your first job when you come into a business like this, is you have to assess the talent, right?
So was that a fencing company or like an equipment company?
It's a wholesale company that only wholesales products that fencing professionals would use.
Okay. So the fencing materials and...
Yeah, vinyl, chain link, aluminum, that kind of stuff.
Okay. So it's more of like a distributor role than necessarily a customer facing...
it is not customer facing, professionals only.
Okay. Interesting. So then what was the ancillary one that you spun off from there?
So I also started in a separate town, in a separate place, its own entity of fencing install team.
Okay. Okay. So now the customer facing side of it then.
Yeah. And so they're associated. So they buy product from my fencing distributor. But I don't operate that day to day. And like I said, it's only associated in that it buys product from my other business.
So how do you go about managing? What's the rhythm of communication? Is it kind of weekly calls with your guys? Like talk to me about how do you manage all these different places remotely? Yeah,
there's a lot of ways to go wrong here. So I suggest over communicating until you know you have it right. Right. And so whatever the cadence is, like if I would say 3 calls a week or 1 hour in the morning or a report every afternoon, no matter what it is that you're using now, I would say just do more until you have a sense of judgment. When I ran my first business by myself, my staff got a little frustrated with me because there were, say, 100 things or so that I thought only an owner could do.
Yep.
And I imagine, does this resonate with you?
Yeah, sure. Yep.
There's some things that only I could possibly understand because I'm the owner, like risk-associated decisions, right? Like liability insurance or what have you. And I thought, well, I own the liability. Who could make a decision on liability insurance except for me? And so I was handling all those decisions. And at some point, the business started to suffer because I wasn't making decisions in a timely manner. And my staff were desperate for answers, right? Decisions. And because I wanted to do everything, they were suffering the results. So like they would have a key staff member. This is what blew up. One day they had a key staff member that they were really trying to bring on board and they needed me involved. And I didn't get back to them and they lost the opportunity with that staff member. And my manager at the time sat me down and gave me a what's up. And she said, look, I'm trying to run this business the best I can. But it's not efficient if, like, yes, you have more business experience than I do. I acknowledge that. But I am on the ground every day and there's some things that I need to do that it would be so much easier if you and I could work something out. And so we decided at that point to invest time and energy into delegation.
Okay.
It's a trait that is hard for people to grasp until they start really managing large teams. Because I remember when I was in sales, I got passed over for the management position in my 20s a few times, and I couldn't understand it because I was one of the best salesperson in a 100-person sales team. And I thought, who else better to manage a team than one of their best salespeople? And what I didn't realize until I finally matured enough to get that spot is there are different skills required to manage a team of salespeople than there are people to sell.
Oh yeah, 100%. Yep.
Right. And so that was a revelation for me. And I think it's a revelation for many people that manage, because managing a team actually requires slightly different skills than managing managers of teams.
Okay.
Right. And so the skill to delegate is not a natural one once you start managing more than 20 or 30 people, because the folks that you teach how to answer the phone or the folks that you teach how to do your skill, right? Mm-hmm. Those are easy because you were always good at those skills.
Yep.
But if you're a manager, they say you can't learn something and you can't teach somebody. You haven't truly learned something until you can teach it.
Yep. Yeah, right? And in terms of retention and all that, you hear it versus you do it versus you teach it. There's it increases your knowledge of it and your confidence in that subject.
Yeah. If you go to a professional sports team, the offensive line coordinator or coach is probably a much better teacher than the head coach. Because the offensive line head coach probably was a great offensive line player, right? And all the skills and attributes that made them a great player are very likely to contribute to them being a good teacher and a good manager. But to manage a team of managers, right, just require skill that's not it's not instinctive. And so to delegate some of those really took us some time and energy, and we had to come up with a whole system that we felt worked for us. And eventually she was running 5 of my businesses at one point.
Okay. So she was like your COO or your right-hand person?
Yeah, she was an operator for a series of 5 businesses, 5 franchises. And she was using these skills to train her managers. She was using our delegation practice techniques to allow them to run the business. Because like as well as I do, if you have 24 locations, right, there are some of them that just don't require your energy or time. Yep. They're on autopilot.
There's zero work into them.
Yeah, but inevitably you've got one at any given time that's a real crisis and require a lot of your energy. And you might be in there for a week fixing things and turn around and realize that you've neglected the other 23. And she was realizing that. She really needed her operators to be able to run the business without her so that she could go focus on something very important for, a week or two at a time.
I always describe it as like spinning plates. Where like you get one going and these others start dropping, and then you got to go over there, and it's this constant game, and you try and make sure they all don't fall and crash. And so what does that delegation system look like? Can you give us kind of the basic framework of it?
Sure. Yeah, we had a 5-point plan, like all good plans. They have bullet points.
Sure.
You can dig into.
Simple. Yeah.
We started to hire and train for trust, which is a very soft skill. It's very subjective, maybe hard to get your fork into until you practice the principles of it. And so when we hired people, we started to interject questions in our interviews about integrity and trust, et cetera, because we knew we were going to be leaving them alone with money and staff and, judgment calls to make. And so that was the first factor, is we had to incorporate trust into it. And that meant, like I said, hiring well. It meant conveying trust. You have to give trust to get it. Mm-hmm. Keep your promises, et cetera. And you have to over communicate. And it's a hard line to draw, but if you start managing a bunch of GMs, you realize that in order for them to trust you, they have to understand you well enough to know what's going inside your head sometimes.
How do you differentiate over communicating versus micromanaging? So focusing on the why is the most
focusing
important.
on the why. Like one of our other steps covers this a little more elegantly, but I think in the beginning, if you over communicate, you're mostly communicating your why so that they understand the directives. And that does build trust. If you're hiding, here's the difference, the key difference, right? If you're not being very transparent, to remember what it was like when you had bosses, right? Mm-hmm. You're always worried about what they're not telling you. That gives you anxiety. And so the more you share with them, the more transparent you are, the less that they feel you're hiding, and that's what builds trust.
Okay.
Maybe that's a little more direct answer. Yeah, okay. So first step is trust. Second is patience. Delegation takes a lot more time than it seems like it should. Right? Here's a recipe for disaster, right? Let's say, for instance, you want to delegate deposits to the bank. It's a very important thing to delegate because it involves cash, right? Mm-hmm. And there's a trust factor and everything. So you send an email and say, hey, starting tomorrow, I'd like you to go to the bank and deposit cash. Well, they may have questions about that, right? That may not be enough. And they will inevitably make decisions that you would not have. They would exercise judgment that you didn't intend. And it can lead to crisis or even catastrophe because you didn't convey yourself clearly. Right? And so the patience part is the patience to have a thorough transition. Hey, I've been realizing that this is something that I can hand off. I really trust you with it. What do you think the parameters are? Let's set them this way, blah, blah, blah. And then I always say, you should expect, as far as expectation goes, you should expect to do it again yourself at least twice before it's handed off to somebody. So let's say, for instance, you'd like someone to roll up reports. Instead of you going onto some portal somewhere and downloading things and putting them into a spreadsheet, you're going to ask them to do it. Well, inevitably, they're going to do it in a format that doesn't speak to you. It's not perfectly the way you wanted it to happen, right? So at the end of the first month, instead of saying, you failed and this is terrible and this doesn't change your behavior, what you could do is you could say, hey, this is really helpful. It's easier for me to read if you do X, Y, and Z. And in the meantime, you've redone it because you need the data, right?
Yep.
To make it useful. And what you can't do is you can't set yourself up for failure, that the things you've delegated are still on your mind, right? So for 2 months or for 2 times, expect that you're going to have to redo the whole thing. And that was that's kind of our threshold for saying, how patient do you need to be?
Okay. Yeah. That's a good gauge of it. The other thing I've heard is like people need to hear something like 7 times before they remember it, or learn it 7 times. And so in that, it's like, man, I've told you this 5 times already. Well, it's maybe not enough. And that's where the patience probably also comes into play.
I will tell you that nomenclature is a big deal to me because I have lots of documents and lots of reports on different servers for different businesses, right? And if people are using different date formats or different filing naming formats and stuff, it's hard for me to search for stuff. And so I found that I need to be patient, and inevitably I will go into my folders and see things are named in a way that's not convenient for me, and I'll just go in and rename them several times, not losing the coaching moment, and say, hey, let's look at this folder together. Is there anything we can make better? I do those things, but I plan on doing it twice. And what that helps is it helps me from, blowing up my my aggro mind, right? While I coach them. Let's see. Okay, so trust, patience, setting escalation thresholds.
Okay.
Because you have retail, you may appreciate this. One of my escalation thresholds is if anyone shows up with a clipboard or a business card, I want to know about it before you let them in the back. Okay. That's a judgment thing. Think about it. If you have 24 or 30 or 50 businesses, some of the people managing those businesses are pretty young and just, short in the tooth. They may be easy to intimidate or bully. I'm Jenny. I'm with a such and such commission, and I need to see yours right now. Right? And what they don't know, that a 53-year-old does know, right, is that there are methods for that. Right? Nobody has the right to go in and see my books. No one has the right to barge into a room with a massage therapist in it. There are all kinds of regulations why I have to prevent that from happening, right? And so the reason that we created these escalation thresholds is because once I started delegating things, they thought that they couldn't call me for anything else. Oh, Todd's trying to unload work on us. He's too busy. He can't be bothered. Right? And so what I did is I created a list of 5 things that they can always bother me. I will step out of a meeting to take a call if someone shows up with a clipboard. Yep. To our business. Or if you experience theft on the site, or if you want to discharge a staff member for any reason, right? Before you fire somebody, that's a conversation you and I should always have. Yep. Even if I'm busy, I'm going to stop what I'm doing to help you confirm your decision, to do it in an elegant way, to follow all the laws, because you don't discharge staff very often, and over a course of years is something that I've been through a few times. So I have a list of 5 things. Okay. Yeah, that's a good one. Set escalation thresholds, so they always know it's okay to call Todd in these situations. The 4th thing that we had was you have to transition to coaching pretty quickly. Like in the beginning, it's actually okay to micromanage. Okay. You need to change the details. You need to teach over and over again, because if you don't describe it in a way that's very specific, sometimes they'll never please you. Right? Okay. You're an entrepreneur. You have a million things bouncing in your head around all the time. Liability and finance and key customers and key staff and scale opportunities. The whole point of delegating is to take some of those things and have them done by someone else so much better than you could do it, that it releases you from having to think about it. Yep. That's the goal of delegation. And so it's okay to micromanage at the beginning, because you have to convey to them in a very clear way what their role can be to help you never think about it again. Yep. And then it's accountability. We want to make sure that they do it. I think a lot of times we found that we'll hand something off and maybe we weren't patient. Maybe we didn't do the coaching, missed some of the steps, but it's like, then we're following up and it's like, they forgot about it too. And it's like, well, what's the point of asking you to do this if you don't do it, and so that's where we're like working on trying to get the systems to make sure it's not micromanaging or not nagging, but it's also, hey, we asked you to do something, you said you were going to do it, like, did you do it or not, This is part of the patient. When we break down patience into subcategories, the monitoring and auditing is a very important part of it, because the things that are reported are the things that get done. The things that get audited are the things that get done. Yeah. And if you don't ask about it, it ceases to be their problem anymore. It's not their fault. If you're not following up on it, you have sent a message that it's not that important. So you can't be mad at them. Yep. You only asked once, and then you never asked me about it. How am I supposed to know it's important if you never check up on it? So to be fair, if you're a real, accountable manager, you realize that that's your bad, not theirs. Okay. Great. Okay? And then the last thing that we worked on and failed at many times before we got it right is you do have to build some redundancies into the system. And it's not because people fail. It's because, remember, our goal is to take some things in our head that are distracting for us and move them outside. Let someone else handle them in such a way so that we can focus on scale and key customers and finance and liability. And if you don't have redundancies, you will be constantly worried about what happens if Sarah gets hit by a bus. Yep. What happens if Joe gets married and moves to Utah because his wife has a great job there, right? What if so-and-so gets enlisted? Right? These are all questions that you will lose sleep over. And if you don't have redundancies, it's hard, in my experience, to kind of get past that anxiety. So those are our 5 steps. Include trust as the part of the process, because you're going to be handing off things that are important and you'll worry about it unless you trust them. Patience, lots of things in patience, but just know that it takes longer to hand something off than you think it does. Set escalation thresholds so it's clear that in some cases, it's okay to call you on your cell phone even if you're traveling, even if you're in a meeting. You have to transition to a coaching mentality or they won't learn it thoroughly enough.
Mm-hmm.
Right? If you just tell them what to do, there will come a point where they can't reach you.
Versus asking them, what do you think we should do, and having them, come up with their own and give them feedback on it. Yep.
Exactly. And then build a redundancy in the system so that you're not up at night worrying about this great person that you just delegated everything to, getting an offer for a new job or moving to Canada.
So do you have redundancy plans for your key people who operate these 4 businesses for you, 3 businesses?
Yeah. Sensitive area because they want to be irreplaceable.
Yep.
Forever. But the way I do that mostly is I help them understand that their growth is tied to creating redundancy for their position. I can't ask you to do more important stuff unless there's someone on your team that can do 70% of everything you do.
Yep.
And that's the way I get past that. And that usually works because I've been growing fast enough. They see that wow, every couple of years there's, some new thing I could do if I just wasn't so irreplaceable.
It's awesome. So with the entrepreneurs that you work with, what are some of the, what's the profile of an entrepreneur that you work with and coach?
Yeah, I think people starting their first business is a period of overwhelm for them. You can really get in over your head. I've had coaches who start their own business and start negotiating with a landlord only to realize that they have to put a personal guarantee down. Mm-hmm. Of the landlord. They just hadn't considered it before, and now they've already paid for a business or they've already invested in equipment, and they can't get a place to live. And a business without a place to work is a business whose value is worth 0. And so there are lots of ways in the first 6 months or year of a business that you can kill it. Cash flow only being one of them.
Yep.
And that's a good profile of a customer.
Okay.
A coaching client, there are a lot of people now that have a special talent and they can't wait for the world to benefit from it. And so they're opening coaching or consulting businesses. And that's fraught with risk.
Okay.
Because most coaches and consultants in the world are not profitable. They could be very helpful, but they're not sustaining businesses for them. And so I help people design, if they really want to be in that business, there are ways, long-term to build a sustainable business model around it. And when people get serious, I'm a good coach for them for that.
Okay. Fantastic. And where can people connect and learn more if they're interested in chatting with you?
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I have a website, Beachview. All my companies are called Beachview. So beachview.biz, .biz, Bravo, Indigo, Zebra.
Okay.
That's the best place. And then most of my consulting and coaching, I run out of a Facebook group called Real Business Coaching. So if you're a Facebook user, they have really good tools for groups in there. So Real Business Coaching, and I have tons of content on there, videos about this delegation technique that I just talked about, or other, other key kind of business fundamentals.
Okay. And any books now you're reading on business leadership, any of that you've been? Boy,
I haven't been such a book reader in the last year. I've been a voracious reader over my career. But I tend to do the social media thing like lots of folks do. There are a couple thought leaders that I check in with every week. Seth Godin being one of them.
Okay.
He's one of the best marketers in the world. He kind of came up with the concept of a tribe and why it's important and how to leverage a tribe. Yep. Scott Galloway is one of the best strategic thinkers I know of. For practical business advice, Tom Bilyeu has a channel called Impact University. And it is really, really worthwhile spending time there because he's super interested, as I am, in young business owners being successful. And he will give his right arm to help you succeed. So I really recommend those pieces of content.
That's good and awesome. Fantastic. Well, I appreciate you coming on the show and kind of sharing all your advice here. I got a ton of notes and got to kind of take this back and apply it. So hopefully if anyone listening did the same, because I think delegation is key to grow and scale. And, we only have so much capacity, and especially in businesses that require, kind of the human capital element to order scale, delegation, coaching, training. I mean, that's how you create consistency, and that's how you then create a good customer experience. And then that's how you grow. So.
Yeah, it's a hard threshold to get past to realize that you have to take yourself out of some of the day-to-day, or you can't work on some of the most important aspects of your business. And that was a lesson that I learned the hard way, and I hope other people can not be as stubborn as I was.
There you go. Awesome. Well, thanks again. And it was great talking to you.
Thanks, Brian. Good luck with things.
Yep. That's all we got for this episode with the Business with Beers podcast. One thing that would really help both us and other new potential listeners is to rate the show and leave a comment in iTunes, Stitcher, wherever you listen. Also, make sure to link up with me on your preferred social media platforms, LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. You can find all my links at brianbeers.com. Please just share the podcast with anyone who you think might enjoy it. And until next time, remember to take the actions others won't, to live the life that others don't.